you were in the occult
Yes.
for 7 years.
Yes.
And started New Age, ended up in Earth magic and Celtic gods.
Celtic. Yeah.
So then what would you say are some of the major dangers of being in the occult, what the occult's really like, how the spells really work, the issue of like, do witches curse random things?
Oh, yeah.
And then what kind of demonic how do the demons treat people from your experience in the occult, especially if they think you're trying to leave?
Yeah. Okay,
those kind of themes.
Where do we start? Well, I guess you would start with, intention is 100% of everything when you're in the occult. Its intention is 100% of everything. And there are, and I can just talk about some of the things that I used to do. I mean, I don't know what other practitioners do, because even though we were talking about like the routine and the ritual, there's no, which I find this really fascinating, there's no playbook for what that routine or that ritual is supposed to be. But sure enough, practitioners of the occult, they'll kind of build their own system, but they all kind of mimic each other a little bit.
Okay.
So, case in point, there's no spell book for anybody. There's no spell book. Depending on the different kind of occult practices that you're in, you might have different pillars that you use. Okay. Like, I know Philomena, it's essentially sex magic is what they call it. But there's like blood involved and other things that we don't have to talk about, but it's sex magic. You have Satanism, or like the Church of Satan, and they're very big on blood as well. Any kind of sacrifices, life is expendable for them. Then you have the way that, and this is where a lot of people kind of confuse the fact that, like, you can use natural medicines and herbs and plants and things like that to heal yourself without getting off in left field doing new agey stuff. Like the essential oils and things like that. Like, you can use some of them if they're ethically sourced, but a lot of the companies that you get them from now are new age and stuff like that. Okay. So when I was talking about the smudging earlier, the smudge sticks, they're essentially just a bundle of dried sage that people will burn to quote unquote get rid of evil spirits. But the person that puts those together, because I know I did it, people would ask for certain things. They'd say, okay, I want to get a new job that makes me more money, or I want to, I'm having trouble in my relationship, or my kids are unruly, or something like that. A lot of it is superstition, but that superstition translates into, spell work. So I would put the sage bundles together, and you do incantations over them, and it doesn't have to be like this crazy grand wizard with a cloak or something, and you're doing like archaic, words and things. You just put them together, and it's your intention. So you're putting your intention into it. Now, the thing about it is, when you're doing something like that, obviously it's contrary to the natural order of things. It's contrary to what God wants you to do. It's contrary to what we have been taught. So the demonic is going to pick up on that. They're always going to pick up on it. Now, are they going to make themselves known in a bad way right away? No. But, if you're putting a piece of someone's hair in a smudge stick, then that spell is going to attach to them. And that's how that works. So a lot of it is the practitioner's intention. You can have people that say, well, you did this spell for me and it didn't work. Well, it's not a 100% guarantee. Sorry. But the more you do it, the more, if you start to get to a point to where you're like, oh my gosh, this is stupid. Why am I even doing this? Then that's when you'll notice stuff starting to work.
Oh.
That's when you notice that, maybe I am doing this right. Maybe I really tapped into something. And that's one of the things that keeps people in the occult, is because you'll have failure after failure after failure. And then you'll start to see, like, quote unquote successes. I don't know who this is. I'm not going to get that. You'll see those quote unquote successes. You know, like I had, and I would never say how I did spells, like, especially now, like if you'd asked me 6-7 years ago, yeah, I'd have told you how I did it. But now I just feel like that's just opening it up, and it's dangerous, and you know, it's that curiosity is really going to hurt somebody. But there's, you know, there was one girl that was just like, I'm having trouble with my boyfriend. I don't think he loves me anymore. And I kind of, and it's really weird, because the more you get into it, the more just like off the cuff, you can just tell him what to do. And they do it, and it supposedly works, and it's that power, or what you perceive to be power, but it's really just manipulations, you know, between good and evil, that start to make you think, oh man, I can do all of this stuff. This is super cool. This is really cool. You know, maybe there's something to it. And so you stay in it, you know, and you keep trying to gain more knowledge and more power, and more knowledge and more power, until it doesn't work anymore. And then you go to another level.
Right.
And you're thinking, okay, well, this isn't work. Like, I'm doing all these little piddly spells for nothing, and it's working. I went up a step and was trying to do something really powerful, like, you know, influence someone's decision on something, and it works. And you're like, wow. So you just ride that wave. And like I said, when it gets to a certain point, it cuts off. And so you look for more things that are more dangerous. That's why I went from just doing the centering prayer, you know, new agey stuff, to earth magic, just being all like, oh, you know, I can do grounding and be perfectly happy. And then I went to a pantheon that was full of death and power and war and things like that. So it's a progression.
So the demonic will bait you.
Yeah,
and they'll
absolutely.
back off. And in order to get their attention again, you'll have to go into a more evil realm.
Yeah.
And you could see a parallel, or maybe that's a mockery of how the progression in the spiritual life. Like you hit a certain, like I had my own experience a long time ago, hit a spiritual plateau. I want to go deeper in my relationship with God. To do that, it does require more work, but it's good.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Do more good things. And then you progress in good.
Yeah.
Whereas with the witchcraft, with the occult,
Yeah.
to attain more diabolical association, you have to do more.
You have
wicked
to dive
things.
deeper. It's almost like drug dealers, kind of, if you think about it. It's like they kind of get you hooked on this little itty bitty thing, and it's cool for a while, but then you hit that plateau and you're like, well, I'm gonna try this. It's cool for a while, and then you hit that plateau, and then by the time you realize that you're so far gone, there's zero turning back. And that's kind of like how that progression goes. But yeah, you know, we went from I remember coming home one time, and my former spouse had painted symbols on the door frames, and I didn't realize what they were at first, and so I looked it up, and they were sigils.
Okay.
You know, and a lot of people are like, oh, you know, it's just a drawing. It's not. No, it's sigils in the occult correlate with a particular demon. And so that kind of stuff was happening in my house. And it just, at the time, felt completely normal to me. Felt, okay, whatever. I mean, you know, we'll just roll with it. And I didn't realize that he had got those books out of, or he got those symbols out of Anton LaVey's book.
Okay.
So.
Would you say Are there? I've heard of the sigils.
Yeah.
I've heard of sigils, but I've never actually seen what they look like. Are they appearing that you've noticed yet in the culture?
Yes.
That we're just overlooking.
Yes, you can see. And you know what? A lot of times they're kind of pretty looking if you see them. They just have like geometric shapes. They're always circular.
Okay.
But they have just geometric shapes in them, or sometimes they'll have like swirlies and things like that. But it almost looks benign, and it almost looks like just something that you would see on a bumper sticker or something like that. And I'm trying to think of where, because I know I saw one somewhere, and I was like, oh, I know that they did not put that there.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, but they're getting more and more prevalent in a lot of places. And like I was talking about with supernatural, you have like these different symbols that people see, and they'll just tattoo them on themselves, and then it just opens it up.
And you said at one point that eventually when you progress, you get to a point of no return. Mm-hmm. So that would be one of the big dangers of getting into the occult.
Yeah.
What is the point of no? Why is it hard to get out, to turn back, to break free?
Because it's kind of like when you have sin on your soul, and we can all just agree that this is a massive sin. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's like a window that's just completely dirty, and you can't get any of the light in. And you get to a certain point, and this is not to say that there is there's no redemption for these people, because obviously there is, you know. Mm-hmm. But it can take a long time, and that work that you have to put in to reverse everything that you've done, a lot of people, that's when you get a lot of attack. It's like, what's the point? There's no point. There's no point in trying. Just, I'm never going to have forgiveness. I'm never going to be redeemed, you know, which is a sin against the Holy Spirit, which is the ultimate unforgivable sin against the whole, you know. Despair against the Holy Spirit. But it kind of hits you, and you're like, oh, okay, well, 0 point. I'm just going to keep on going.
It's almost like the mechanism or the intention of the diabolical, for the occult, the whole game is despair. Because they lure you in with power, and the moment you realize how dark you've gone and you try to get out, that's when they attack.
You feel like you can't. Yeah, because it's nonstop. It's nonstop. And that's, I can honestly tell you that that had it not been for the birth of my son and meeting my husband, I don't know if I mean, this is not to say that, you know, the good Lord's mercy would not have touched me at some point, because he has plans for all of us, and he knows where, you know, he knows where we are. But, you know, it was hard to get out of. And it was one of those things, like, I had to make a 100% clean break. There was no 12-step program for me. There was no, you know, all right, I'm going to back up just a little bit and kind of reassess and reevaluate where I'm going. This was one of those things that, like, if I didn't make that clean break from everything, then it just was never going to happen, you know. And I've thought about that a lot, and I was, you know, I did have a lot of despair about it. I didn't have despair to the point where I was just like, I can never come back, but I thought, you know, kind of like I said earlier about, you know, my former spouse, I made this bed, I'm going to have to lie in it. That kind of a thing. Yeah. I mean, thank you for the grace of God and divine providence that didn't work out that way, you know. And I think a lot of times these practitioners, because sometimes they get so heavy into it, you're either going to go one of two ways. You are going to go, and we see this a lot with atheists, they're so angry and antagonistic towards Christians completely, to the point that you're like, why are you bothering me? If I'm right, then you're the one that's in trouble. If you're right, then nothing is going to happen and you're fine. Leave me alone. Okay, but you've got these antagonistic atheists, and then you can have people that are in the occult that are extremely antagonistic, like to the point that they're oftentimes the ones that when you see churches being vandalized, and things like that. Or you hear stories about Satanists that will go into church to try and get the Eucharist, and that's one of the reasons why I absolutely cannot stand Eucharist in the hand. You should not receive it in your hand at all. But in the other way, like the other swing, is that you have people that, like I was, they want to get out, but maybe not. It all depends on what happens. We'll see what happens. So when you get that, like, obviously, like the extreme, you can tell the influence of the demonic. I mean, it's just 100% absolutely there, but it's really hard to discern that when you've swung the other way. It's really hard to discern that. And it wasn't until after I got out that I was able to kind of say, oh, okay, that's demonic. That's demonic. That's 100, you can point it out now. So whereas the other side, they're like, if they see demonic, they're like, I don't care. Yeah, I know it's demonic and I don't care. And the other side, if they get out, they're like, ooh, that's a slippery slope, my friend. Yeah.
When you were leaving, so what was my thought? Kept coming and going. Well, yeah, was there a moment, like when you were making that clean break, getting out, was there a retaliation? Some people, ex-occultists, have shared that there was a concrete attempt to hurt them, harm them, or draw them back in, or some kind of oppression where there was some kind of attack on their livelihood.
Yeah, and a lot of this goes toward, trying to find a nice way to tell this story. I'm just going to go for it. So when I was making that clean break, I didn't just make the clean break from the occult. I made a clean break from everything. But when I was like, okay, I need to not do this anymore. There were lots of things that happened personally, physically, mentally, that mental block, just extreme depression. Extreme depression to the point where you're just thinking, what's the point? Just really, really bad depression that's very uncharacteristic of what you would normally experience, because everybody has their ups and downs, and some people struggle with depression and some people don't. I happen to be one of those people that I typically don't. So this was one of those instances where it was like, I have no idea what's going on. I have no clue. Just thinking things that are so abhorrent that you're like, where is this coming from? Do I need therapy? What's happening to me? Just little things like that. Physically, that's when I started to notice physical things going on with me, as far as that eventually led to my diagnosis with lupus. But it was just weird little things that made zero sense whatsoever. Lots of relationships that used to be really great just fell apart. And they weren't just one of those subtle things. It was everything. This was before my former spouse had passed away, but it was one of those things, he was not a very nice person to begin with, but he would contact me, and things that he would say genuinely had me fearing for my safety. And it was just a conglomeration of things that just made no sense at the time. But now that I'm out, it's almost like that smoker thing. When you're not smoking, you can smell it. Now I realize what that was, and it was attack. It was attack. There was, I don't know if anybody else has said, I would imagine that somebody else has said this, but there's a lot of sleep disturbances at night.
Okay, yeah, I've heard this a lot.
Yeah, lots of sleep disturbances at night where you either wake up and you see something, or you have dreams that you are just like, what is even happening right now? Just dreams that are so terrifying that they wake you up. So lots and lots of sleep disturbances, and kind of seeing things, and not being able to close your eyes because you feel like something is just right here in your face. So
Yeah.
It can get fun sometimes. It can be fun.
So you mentioned your first husband.
Mm-hmm.
What was he? So on to the issue of the spells. Like in the occult, what was he seeking from the occult?
He wanted power. He just wanted to be like the most powerful, but he wanted everyone to be afraid of him, and that was literally his goal. He was like, I want every single person that I meet to be devastatingly afraid of me. And that was his goal.
Was that I assume he had a job. So was that was it a bifurcation of the personality, like a daytime persona and a nighttime persona?
Yeah, it was, for the most part. I mean, there are people that would kind of catch glimpses of the person that he was, and they would comment on it. But even then I was like, wow, they've got it wrong. You know, they don't understand him. He's just a weird guy. But that's not how it was. I mean, the person when he walked in the front door was totally different than the face that he presented to the outside world.
So all of his magic and spells and sacrifices were all to achieve some kind of, was it a power in the world, like Kingdom of Satan kind of concept, or just he was his own god?
No, it was power in the world. That's what he wanted. Once I found out all of this stuff, it was very evident to me that he had already thought that he was his own god. I mean, that's it. But he was very, very adamant about the fact that, like, I want people to, like, turn and run the other way because they're that afraid of me. And congratulations, he got what he wanted eventually, but it wasn't through his doing. It was, God's providence, knowing that, people are going to go another way with their life. But that's what he wanted. He just wanted power. He wanted people to be in fear. He just thrived off of it. I mean, that was his thing. He just absolutely ate it up.
What about other realms of the occult, like Wicca, witchcraft, earth magic? What are those people really looking for? And then what do they find? We kind of talked about that. But
they find absolutely nothing but an empty void where they think something should be. Everybody goes into it for different reasons, or supposedly they go into it for different reasons. So and I know that there are a lot of, most magic practitioners, their kind of goal is harm no one. And I always think it's really funny because in different realms they have what they call the threefold, which is obviously trying to parallel or mock the Trinity, but it's whatever you do to someone will come back to you threefold.
Okay. So
that's what that is. And so a lot of times you'll have people that they don't do quote unquote harmful spells, but anything is harmful. I mean, everything is going to be harmful. Even if you say, I only do good things. It doesn't matter. You're still sinning against God. And that's the thing that they don't realize, because they're like, well, there is no God. Really? So what deity are you worshiping, and where did they show up from? How did they get here? I got into it originally, and this is going to sound like the biggest cop-out in the world. I got into it originally to impress my ex-husband. I really did, because and it was really kind of scary the way that he just sounds so enlightened and so smart and so well-read and well-versed and all of these things like that. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll kind of check it out. And then it just kind of sucked me in. And so what I was trying to get out of it is, first of all, I was trying to find a little bit of peace within myself, and I didn't realize that I was being unduly influenced by everything that he had going on, because there were in our house, there were things that happened on a daily basis that were just strange. Like parlor tricks, things strange.
Okay. Preternatural manifestations.
Yeah, like the manifestations, it was just really, really weird. so I was trying to find like a little bit of peace, I guess, and then I just kept going with it and going with it and going with it, and by the time I was ready to make that break, I was so deep into it, and it was oppressive. So there was no peace to be found, but you keep going. So there are a lot of people that want power. There are some people that there are a lot of people that just give in to the idea of being special.
That was a good, yeah. Okay.
Like that's the one thing that sets you apart from everybody else, is like you have this magical power or something like that, but you don't. You're just really being influenced demonically. So, yeah. All right. So, but yeah. So, like I was, it's love, money, and power. And you can have different subsects of those different things, but they all kind of, it's almost like, the 10 Commandments. All right, let's break it down. If you're doing a confession or something, like the different, bullet points, but you can have different bullet points on there. It's definitely love, money, and power. Honestly, what's the two that are the most kind of, they're a little bit weird. So, but it takes more, I would say more demonic influence to get them, is the love and the power. Because, love can be misconstrued in a lot of different ways. Love can seem like it's great to start with, and then it's super toxic, and power, people can think that they're in power, but they're not. But those are the three most. So we were talking about objects and being cursed and things like that.
Oh, yeah, right.
So do they curse everything? No. Obviously that's going to be up to different individuals, because there are some individuals that are just awful.
Right.
But I've actually seen people going through the store and just
Cursing random things.
Just absolutely random things, just because they feel like they can. They feel like they can, and curses actually do have power, because there's malicious intent there. And that's the big difference between you need a love spell, quote unquote, sure, I can help you out with that, versus the malicious intent is, I'm out to hurt somebody. And I don't care who it is. I don't care how I hurt them. I don't care what happens. I'm out to hurt somebody. So that malicious intent, those curses stick. And those are really dangerous. It's one of the reasons I love going to antique stores. I won't buy anything from one. I won't do it, because you never know where an item has come from, who's owned that item. I've actually gotten rid of furniture before, because it was oppressive. It was just absolutely oppressive, and you can just feel it. You're like, nope, out of my house. Gotta get it.
And I was wondering, why would someone curse something? When it comes to what is someone seeking from the occult? But then I guess that would fall under the power. If you feel like you can harm,
absolutely,
you're like your former husband.
Yeah.
And that's, you said which one was the most difficult to receive a positive answer for?
It's typically
money?
love and power.
Those are the
love
ones
and power. Those are the ones that typically backfire.
Okay. You have to do more to
Yeah.
get it. Yeah, because if you're cursing something out, that sense of power, it's very much more diabolical.
Yeah. But that's the malicious intent, because you can't, like you just said, you can't have a greater source of power than knowing somebody's going to get hurt because of what I can do. You think, oh, okay, I've got this ability, I can do this. No, it's not. Your intention is just acting as a vehicle for the demonic, because you are essentially putting that on somebody.
A question about commonplace witchcraft or occult. Not just signs and symbols, but activity in the culture that we're overlooking. Yeah, how'd you comment on that?
And I know I've harped on this a couple of different times, but that sage smudging just drives me up a wall, because it's just like, my husband calls it soccer mom witchcraft.
Okay,
That's what he calls it. Because you've got a lot of these people, they don't think that they think it's benign, and it's not. So you've got the sage smudging, because like I said, somebody has to put that together, and whoever's putting it together, there's intention in there. There's spell work in this, you know.
Because where do you typically buy?
You typically get them from like New Age shops.
Okay.
Like because they're everywhere.
Will people go into these New Age shops looking for these mild, quote unquote, mild superstition things like sage?
Yeah.
And just be completely oblivious to the fact that it's actually a witch store?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. They just think it's kitschy, or it's cute, or just because I don't believe in it, you know. I mean, I don't believe in it, but I'm still going to go shop there for some stuff. So if you're in like these New Age witchy stores, everything has a spell attached to it. Everything has some kind of something attached to it.
That's good.
And it doesn't really matter if you can go into one of those New Age witch stores and just be like, oh, I got this pencil. It's just kind of kitschy. It's got the name of the store on it. It doesn't matter, because a lot of times what they do is they will do spell work over the whole store before they even bring anything in. And just like, you know, Catholics, we are going to bless ourselves before we eat. We're going to bless our food. We're going to do that. That's what they do. If something comes in, like if they get a shipment of something, there's some spell work that's going to go over it.
So what kind of spells would they put on things? Do they have like a generic kind of thing?
A lot of times what they'll do is protection spells, what they call protection spells.
Okay.
Or they can, depending on what the object is, they can do, like if you're going into a store for like essential oils that are supposed to help you or heal you, or the crystals or whatever, they'll do healing spells or potency spells,
right.
Or like I said, it really depends on the object, but a lot of times what they'll do, if it's just generic stock coming in, they'll do like protection spells.
Like over the books?
Yeah, like over the books or whatever.
Because I did, and I talk about this almost often, especially in these conversations, years ago, I think before I wrote Slaying Dragons, or when I was researching it, I figured out, I don't know how I figured it out, but if you go to Google Maps and you put in the Google Map search, metaphysical supply stores, and hit search, and then look at the U.S. map and zoom in, and they'll all pop up. Those are the witchcraft New Agey stores. They're labeled as metaphysical supply stores.
Which annoys me because, you know,
metaphysics.
Because of Thomas Aquinas. That annoys me so bad. I'm like, you're not metaphysical. Just stop it.
But that's one thing people can do. Like if you want to know how prevalent, I wish I could tell Google Map to give me the data. Like how many in what cities are labeled like this. So we can, someone could probably do that in 5 seconds.
We have one at the tea shop.
In this tiny little town.
In this wee tiny little Bible Belt town. There is one. And you know what's really weird is because we were going to eat, we were going to dinner. I didn't even know it was open. We drove past it and I was like, what is that? And my husband was looking at me, he was like, what are you talking about? And I said, that. And it was dark and we were on the other side of the road. And I was like, that. I said, go around. So we went around the roundabout and it was like, sure enough, they do tarot readings and they sell supplies and now they sell tea, which is adorable. But so in our wee little Bible Belt town, we've got.
Yeah, and if there's no other piece of evidence that could convince someone, like, why would a tiny Bible Belt town, have an occult store? Like, and where's the governance? There should be some like board in the city that would say, no, we're not allowing that in.
I mean, you would think so, but
nowadays you can't. Like, Satan has a right in this country.
Yeah, absolutely, which is
another big red flag.
Beyond frightening. Absolutely beyond frightening. I think the only thing that makes me feel a little bit better is about the fact that, like, you know, our blessed Lord has already won the war.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's already won the war. We're just having to go through the battles. And that's...
Yeah, and I think that's a necessary dogma, that Christ has already been victorious, because without that, we would despair.
Yeah, absolutely.
There'd be no source of hope. The source of our hope is that he has already won.
Yeah.
Because then we can tap into the victory while we're watching the manifestation of evil happen in front of us.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. So, but yeah, going back to the question, I mean, I've seen practitioners like curse a home when they pass. I've seen them just curse random objects and things like that. And that, now that's when none of it is benign, but that's when you're really getting into that demonic influence is just really so heavy that if you're willing to curse someone, that's just beyond. That's beyond the pale.
Yeah. Not just going along with the occult, but tapping in and joining yourself with the malice of it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like if somebody comes to you for a spell, then that's just an interaction between the two of you. But, and this person is coming to you for something that's like, oh, okay, X, Y, or Z. Let's do it this way. If you have somebody that's doing curses, it's just like firing a loaded gun into a crowd. I know I'm going to hit somebody. Don't know who, don't really care. And that's what that's tantamount to.
Yeah.
So.
Two questions just popped to mind.
These are always fun.
Yeah.
Those are usually the best ones.
When, well, first, how many are there on the infiltration idea? Are there witches, warlocks, magicians, Satanists infiltrating like churches?
Yes.
Sitting in the pews during Mass?
Yes.
And what are they? How do you tell? What are they doing? How frequent is this occurring? Any insights on that idea?
Sometimes, I'm trying to find a nice way to put this, but I don't really see the point in sugarcoating it. Because we've gotten to the point that this is going to sound bad, but oh well, but like this all are welcome mentality.
Right.
It's opened the door. So, and a lot of people, because they're not very observant, essentially. They're not very observant. I can think of one time when I went to Mass over here that it was during the consecration, and it just felt weird. And there was a guy sitting behind me. I had never seen him before. I didn't know who he was or where he came from. But he was sitting directly behind my family and I. And during the consecration, it was just like, and when I say stuff like this, some people are like, oh my gosh, that sounds new agey. No, it's not. It's kind of like, I guess you could call it a gift from the Holy Spirit for this discernment. Yeah. Because it just felt off. It felt completely off. This is the one moment, the source and summit of our faith, where it's beautiful and we're actually in the physical presence of our Lord. And I couldn't focus because I kept turning around looking at this guy. And before they went to distribute the Eucharist, he left. Because I just kept looking at him. I just kept turning around and looking at him. Yeah. And it was super weird. And I was like, okay, that was one of those instances where, like, if he had got his hands on that, it would have been really bad. Yeah. And that's ultimately, like, when you have occult practitioners that are sitting in Mass, that's what they want. That's what they prize that. Yeah. Because that's the reality. That is our Lord, which is insane if you think about it, because everything that you're doing goes contrary to what you obviously believe. You obviously believe that is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. but you believe it in like a very disrespectful way. And that's really interesting. So a lot of times when you have these witches, warlocks, these Satanists that sit in mass, I think the best thing to do is just be observant of your surroundings. Now, if you are going to a super crowded, extraordinary forum, might not be able to pay that much attention because you're focused on the Lord. But then I highly doubt that any of them would be going to any of those either.
Because then they have to go face to face with the priest.
Because then you have to go right there, face to face. He is looking at you in the eye, and you are not putting your hands up.
And you're
absolutely
kneeling.
not. You are kneeling. You're not putting your hands up there. So.
And I wonder if that is another reason, like the rise of the occult was another reason for the church to flip fast back to kneeling on the tongue only at the altar rail, at the communion rail. Because, like, if you're possessed, you won't approach the holy.
Yeah.
And if you can approach the holy, it's only baby steps. But they're requiring you to go all the way up, look at the priest. No one else is allowed to do it. Kneel in front of the altar. And stick out your tongue.
If you have like this much distance between you
and a layman, perhaps.
Or an extraordinary minister, I mean, that's super easy. You just, here, go ahead, But if you're forced with that confrontation, then it takes it all out. But I think people just need to be observant. Like I'm not saying like scrutinize every single human being that you see that's new to Mass, because we were all new at a parish at some point.
Right.
But if you see someone that very typically, you'll see Satanists that know the liturgy extremely well. I mean, extremely well. Like backwards, forwards, literally in its entirety. But if you see someone that just kind of, they're looking around before they stand, they're looking around before they kneel, they just be observant, just be observant. And ultimately, that's something that needs to be brought up to the parish priest. Like, this person was here. And it needs to be something that, and this is why I really wish more priests and deacons and altar servers would pay attention to these things, because I know here one time, but there was someone that took the Eucharist on the hand and just closed his palm and went to leave, and this young man, who is now a seminarian, grabbed him by his shirt collar and brought him back.
Nice.
So,
yeah.
I mean, people need to be aware. Don't toss it out there like it doesn't have all the meaning in the world, because you're trying to get through the line, or you want to hurry up and get to announcements or something like that. There needs to be that reverence and that observance, and people need to pay attention. So,
yeah, we have in my parish, I don't know what they're called, but people who are like ushers that stand next to the communion lines and make sure everybody receives and does not walk off, and they're watching like a hawk.
I think they're called porters. I think every parish needs that. I mean, why not? If we're not protecting the most sacred thing, then what are we doing? But long answer short, yes, they do go into masses, and if you're paying attention, they're pretty easy to pick out.
I think I remember another one. Is it just Satanists who try to steal hosts, or is it across all the different realms in the occult, like Wicca, witchcraft? Do they all? Is that like a chief prize, a high ritual, high rite? Is it exclusive to Satanists? Does everybody try to get a?
It's no. It's kind of a really weird swing, because you have like people that are doing, Wicca and earth magic and things like that are just stay away from it. Like, I don't need that near me. And then you have people that are like in Philomena or the Church of Satan or black magic circles that, yes, that's absolutely 100% like the greatest prize to be won. And that's why they'll sneak in and stuff like that. But typically, like I was saying, like Satanists know the liturgy. They know their scripture. They just don't care. But that is their ultimate goal.
When occult practitioners of all the different realms In what way do the demons, because it's diabolical, in what way do the demons interact with them? And in a sense, like, is there a, because isn't it described by exorcists, being possessed, dabbling with demons as an abusive relationship?
Yeah.
So how would you describe that? Almost like, how would you warn someone who's curious about the occult and is tapping into powers that this is what demons are really going to do, how they're really going to treat you? These are the things to look for. Any comments on there? Things
to look for. Well, let's back up to how they really feel about you and how they're going to treat you. The demonic, anybody that is going to be in the occult, they think you are stupid. They think you're absolutely bottom of the barrel, the dumbest life form on the planet. And the reason being is because obviously the demonic knows what the truth is. I mean, they know the truth. So everything that you're doing to appease them, you can offer wine or sacrifices or something like that, or pretend to pray to the saints. Like, I know there are a lot of people that don't think voodoo. They're like, voodoo doesn't count because they use Catholic saints. No, it's 100% the occult.
Yeah.
And anybody that's got an active human soul that's been down to the bayous of Mississippi or New Orleans can tell you that it's pervasive, it's oppressive, it's there. But they think you're dumb. They absolutely 100% think you're dumb. They think you're so stupid. Now, are they going to reel out the line a little bit for you so you think that you're doing well? Absolutely. Some of your spells will start working. Your personal life might be in the best state it's ever been in. You might be able to get that dream girl or that dream guy. You might be able to get your dream job. Your bank account may have an extra zero in it, which is awesome. Like, they're going to toss out the line, but they're going to jerk it back just as fast. But then they'll toss it back out. Like I got a job at a casino and I was making and this is in the early 2000s. I was making $65,000, $70,000 a year. Just me. At a casino. And I didn't even put in for this job. They were like, hey, we think we'd like to promote you. Cool. So what? This? Oh, wow. Awesome. So it's that little taste of, hey, you've got some power. You're doing some great things. Yeah. But people don't pay attention to the peripheries. The fact that you're going to be depressed a lot. You're going to have things that are happening in your life that had never happened before and don't make sense. And I'm not saying that that demons can kill you, but they can, teachings from exorcists and things like that, they will influence so much because that's what they do. They operate in thought, like angels. That's how they communicate. So, just feelings of despair, just like, you're just not worth this promotion. I don't even understand why they gave it to you. Your husband hates you. He doesn't like you. Your family doesn't like you. Maybe you should do a spell about it. Okay. It's a cycle. It's absolutely a cycle. And that's the things that they'll do. But when you're in it, you're not paying attention to it. You're thinking you're just going through the motions, and this is daily life. This has nothing to do with the spell work or the practice that I'm doing. It's got nothing to do with it whatsoever. I only do quote unquote positive things, but none of it's positive.
And all the while you're being coached.
All the while you are literally being coached. You're literally just constantly having something pushing you towards it, just farther and farther and farther. And I honestly think ultimately that goal is to get you to that despair against the Holy Spirit. That's the ultimate goal. We're collecting souls, and you're never going to come back from it. And that's the goal.
How do you think you could, for someone who's in the occult, what's the best way to reach them? And what is the diabolical doing to prevent them from listening to anybody who's trying to reach them?
The diabolical always operates on pride. It always operates on pride and your ego. So if you were going to reach out to somebody, one of the things that I would do is like the conversation that we're having. I would honestly sit down and have a conversation with them and just say, hey, so tell me about this in your life. Like, how are things going in your life? How's your mental health? How's, just kind of open the door that way.
Get
And
them
start
talking.
get them talking about it first, because if they're closed off, then obviously you're not going to be able to do it. But you really need to hit on that and understand that there's a lot of pride there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of pride in that, okay, I've made this bad, I'm going to lie in it kind of thing, like I've said before. But just open the conversation up with, recognizing, especially if you've done it and you've come out of it, recognizing that where they are, you've been. So it's like, and I'm not going to say meet them where they are, because I can't stand that. It's like, you can meet them where they are. No. But recognizing that despair and that anger and that pain and that emptiness and feeling like you have all this power, but you really don't, because one way or another it keeps getting jerked back from you. Just connect with them on that level and be honest about it. Don't sugarcoat it and say, well, it'll be okay. Like, no, you are under the influence of the demonic, and here's how I know, and here's what you can do to fix it. Now would this take a couple of conversations? Yeah. But they're worth it, especially when somebody is willing to have that conversation.
Yeah, and I think if you can get them to express the fact that they are depressed, then they now have to confront it. Whereas before you have the conversation, the demon, they can lie to themselves about it. But now they've just admitted that they are tending towards despair, and then that's not going to sit well.
Yeah.
And then hopefully that'll destabilize.
Yeah. It's very interesting that there are a lot of correlations between every single person that I've known that has been in the occult either struggled with alcohol or drugs or some kind of something. I've known several that just were actual sex addicts, some of them that ended up having to go to rehab. I have no problem admitting the fact that I struggled with alcohol, because you think that you've got all of this stuff, but you don't. And so you're putting another vice and another sin on top of it. So you've got, the sin of lust and promiscuity, the sin of you're essentially destroying your body with these substances and things like that. So they compound on each other.
So when the occult starts to fail, then the desperation causes them to grab onto other vices.
You're grabbing onto other vices, and so you're just like filling that bag full of stones, and it's heavy.
What do you as a former occultist want Catholics and everyone to know? That can be like a whole hour.
Okay.
But so as a primer.
Yeah.
Yeah, what would you say as a primer?
What do I want them to know? That spiritual warfare is real. It's real. It's not fake. It's not some made up thing that trads came up with. It's not something that we're glomming onto just because we feel like it's fun and trendy. It's real. It happens every single day, and so many people are blind to it. They're blind to it, either because they're stubborn and prideful and they just think, oh, that's not possible, or because they don't know enough.
Right.
So if there was one absolute thing that I could just scream from the rooftop with a loudspeaker, just there is a spiritual battle going on, and you are a part of it, and you have to pick a side, or they're going to choose for you.
Yeah, because you're right. If you're not listening to the inspirations and obeying the inspirations of God, then you are going to be lulled.
You're going counter to it.
Yeah.
And that's what, I have a friend, she calls them the downstairs neighbors.
Okay.
And she was like, they may make a lot of noise, but don't let them come up to your apartment. Okay, cool. That's how it works. So you just have to be aware of the fact that they're there. That they are there. Now, don't obsess about it.
Right.
Like, don't obsess about it, and don't think every single thing is, demonic. Like, your bottle falls off the table and you're like, it's the demons or something. Or if you lose your car keys, don't think Satan's testing me today, because it's not. Sometimes that can happen, but it's not every little nuance and every little thing. Don't obsess about it. Pray about it. and you live your life in such a way that you know if you're called to battle, what side you're going to be on.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah.
Because if we give too much attention,
Then it's winning and it's feeding into it.
yeah, feeds into fear, and then we become vulnerable.
Yeah, almost like people that watch like crime TV shows and they're just like, everyone and everything is going to kill me. No, it's not the case. Maybe back off a little bit.
That's right.
You know, it's okay. I
Maybe read a
promise.
book.
Yeah, read a book. Not something that's going to upset you. Like, go read Chesterton or something. But yeah, people just need to be aware. They need to be aware, and they need to, be prepared for the battle that we're in.